Hey, today is July 12th, 2024. And I'm Byron Zom out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And with me is my faithful colleague out in San Diego, California, Chris Lean. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Byron. Depending on how cold somebody might have their AC running today, they might think it's January rather than July, but we'll roll with
Well, today we're having a conversation about SAT, ACT, and the status of this thing that we became aware of, particularly during COVID season, right, where so many of the schools became quote unquote test optional, and even then that had a variety of interpretations and meanings. But I think that's even more the case now with where we're at because the schools by and large have been retracting their position on this whole idea of test optional. But first, we want to talk about what is test optional, what are the differences for the schools, and how is that changing? And you've got some insight into this.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Byron. Yeah, just a very short history is with the SAT and the ACT, those have been up until COVID. They've been rites of passage, if you will, at particularly the elite universities, Ivy Leagues, the Ivy Plus, and a lot of the engineering colleges have used SAT and ACT scores as a means of helping to sort of confirm or triangulate otherwise strong credentials, GPAs, all sorts of other academic factors, not the non-academic factors, which are every bit as important,
Yeah.
essays, recommendation letters, and so on. But as far as the raw numbers, SAT and ACT have been not only in the US, but even internationally for students who are intending to attend the US colleges. Well, somewhere around March of 2020, that's when, of course, all the COVID lockdowns happened. So at that point, it was not possible to take an SAT or ACT temporarily at that time because of meeting restrictions, and particularly in places like California, New York, New Jersey, where it was very locked down for very long. So you saw that happen, and immediately a number of colleges then adopted some test optional, but a lot went what they called test blind. And in parallel with that, there had been sort of this undercurrent of a lot of people very against the SAT and ACT for a lot of valid reasons. So a lot of these things all came together, and so for about a 2.5 year period, many colleges, the vast majority of colleges, did not consider SAT and ACT scores as a component of college admissions. Fast forward to about the 2023 cycle. And what had happened is the colleges went through at least two admission cycles without the use of the SAT and the ACT scores. And you have rampant grade inflation. To quote Janet Napolitano, the former chancellor of the University of California system several years ago, and you see these things. And what happened is a lot of students were getting into colleges, and unfortunately, the dropout or the failure rate of college freshmen increased as well, and particularly at some of the more demanding universities. A lot of reasons for that, but what one of the fixes to that has been, particularly in recent months, is to add back the requirement for the SAT and the ACT. And in a lot of the elite colleges, but also many universities throughout the Midwest and the South, where even some of the majors, it may not be a university-wide policy, but majors like engineering, computer science, medicine, the really high demand technical majors, those have added those back. There are a couple of exceptions. Some of the elite liberal arts colleges in the Northeast have remained test blind. And where I'm at in California, a very outsized perception happens here with the University of California's 9 campuses and California State University's 23 campuses, I believe it is. All of them remain test blind. You still can submit your SAT or ACT scores for the sections to be considered to exempt the student from freshman level math or English. And that's a little known fact, but it is on their websites. But there's that. And then the last reason why those colleges went test blind is because in many states, especially California, the number of test locations has not returned to what it was pre-pandemic. Again, because of the UC and CSUs being test blind. So we have many students here who have to go out of state to go take an SAT or ACT. So there's still quite a bit of change, but what we are finding outside of California, across the rest of the nation, it is a very fast growing trend for the exams to be required once again, or test optional, but strongly recommended when you look at that admissions data and how that's played out the last 2 or 3 cycles.
So where I'm at here in New Mexico, we're definitely, seeing a value being placed on that. So, those numbers are being looked at. But another question comes to my mind in this, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. At that time during COVID, the whole idea of the DSAT came about, the digital SAT, right? And so I'm curious, do you think that transition to a digital version has anything at all to do with the swing back to test requirements?
Well, yeah, and or at least test acceptance, shall we call it, or test tolerance, perhaps. Yeah, and that's something that's been on the table because of the historic criticisms, if you will, of the tests themselves, and correlation versus causation. There's a lot of debate that goes back and forth on the merits of the exams. However, what College Board had been doing and planning, but accelerated as a result of the pandemic, they created the digital SAT, which was it's about half an hour shorter, or 35 minutes shorter, I guess. The long passages have now been shortened into much more brief passages, with the questions not being quite as different. And of course, the somewhat adaptive nature of the exams themselves, where everyone takes the first same 2 modules and then they go to a harder or easier level module as the second module for the math, and then for the English language arts. So that, if you want to call it a concession to a degree, or something that was in parallel, I think made it more palatable in many jurisdictions to bring it back again. Shorter test, supposed to be more fair, particularly for English language learners, and a number of other things to address those concerns people had.
So, the idea of inflated GPAs, right, really puts a spotlight on the validity of being able to use these SAT, ACT scores. So, well, the trend basically is they're coming back, and that's what people need to know, right? So, something like 30% of the schools are saying, yes, we do want these scores, find out from your school which they prefer, but they are asking for them. So, but we're continuing to see that bounce back more and more, right?
Well, yes, and the actions speak louder than words when it's coming to the admissions data. A number of universities, it's out there, it can easily be found on the web, or as it says in the textbook, the student can easily verify that using a Google search, that places even like Arizona State, where 75% of the students admitted had submitted a score. So it's almost very similar phonetically, admitted, submitted, but a 75 to 80% correlation there. Whereas those students who were rejected, about 2/3 of the students who were rejected did not submit a score. And we see that play out over and over and over again. And I'm involved in a lot of webinars that feature a lot of college admissions deans and such. Many of them have admitted that when it comes down to it, yeah, I mean, it is a help when all else is equal, and they're looking and they see that the test scores are there to verify an otherwise strong profile. There is sort of that help, and they do find that. In fact, one other thing, there was a somewhat controversial paper that was released by 4 professors at the UC system. I believe it was in January of this year, and created a firestorm for a while. they had said that the SAT and ACT as well are much stronger predictions of college success and survivability in that freshman year, much more so than GPA. And they went even one step further and said they were sort of demanding that the UC system return to full requirement of these exam scores again. There was a bit of a dust up after that. I don't think any of them lost their positions, but the UC system had been very adamant that they would not be doing that. However, again, there's a lot of research out there that does show that a student that does have the strong SAT and ACT scores tends to be more successful in those universities that do have the very rigorous environments. Cause or effect, that can be debated, but nonetheless, that's why many of these institutions have returned to requirement of the scores.
Well, at Tutor Doctor, we want our students to stay ahead of the curve, so to speak. And so this message here that those scores are becoming more and more valuable. So take the time, invest your time, prepare, talk to your local Tutor Doctor office. They can get you a great consultation and get you set up so that you can perform your best and bring your best results there. And that'll be one of the big components for more and more of the schools that you may be applying to. So, Chris, thanks so much for sharing your insight with us today. We want to remind folks to call the local office. They're in San Diego, California, here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and all throughout the United States. And we have an 800 number that is 800-488-8677. And we'll look forward to helping us watch for our next podcast, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.